The Galilean Wars, Ice and Fire. The frozen horizon of Europa stretched endlessly before Commander Zarich as she stood in the observation deck of the orbital defense platform Tiamat's shield. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, the ice-covered moon's surface gleamed like polished marble under Jupiter's massive presence. The great red spot, now a brilliant crimson eye, watched over the Galilean system like an ancient god surveying its domain. It was the year 4569, and humanity had reached heights that would have seemed impossible to their ancestors. Quantum computers the size of molecules processed reality itself, reshaping matter at the subatomic level. Fusion reactors powered by controlled miniature stars provided unlimited energy. Consciousness could be transferred between biological and synthetic substrates at will. Death had become optional, aging a choice, and the boundaries between human and machine had blurred beyond recognition. Yet for all their technological mastery, humans remained fundamentally human. They still fought wars. "Commander," came the voice of Lieutenant Marcus Volta, his enhanced neural implants allowing him to interface directly with the station's sensor array. "We're detecting massive energy signatures from Io. The Forge Lords are mobilizing their entire fleet." Zara's expression hardened. The Forge Lords of Io had been preparing for this confrontation for decades. While Europa had focused on biotechnology and quantum sciences, developing their civilization within the moon's vast subsurface oceans, Io's colonists had embraced pure industrial might. They had turned their volcanic moon into a massive foundry, harnessing the geological fury to create weapons and ships that could reshape worlds. "How many ships?" Zara asked, her cybernetic eye already calculating trajectories and battle formations. 37 dreadnoughts, 200 cruisers, and over 1,000 smaller vessels. They're launching from the Prometheus shipyards. Marcus paused, his face pale. "Commander, long-range sensors are also detecting something else. They've activated the Vulcan Forge." A chill ran through Zara's enhanced nervous system. The Vulcan Forge was Io's ultimate weapon, a massive orbital platform that could harness the moon's volcanic energy and channel it into a focused beam capable of cracking a moon's crust. In the wrong hands, it could boil away Europa's protective ice shell and destroy the ocean civilization beneath. The war between Europa and Io had been inevitable. For centuries, the two civilizations had developed along radically different paths. Europa's cities floated in the dark waters beneath kilometers of ice, powered by geothermal vents and populated by humans who had adapted to aquatic life. Many Europeans had modified themselves with gills, enhanced pressure tolerance, and bioluminescent communication systems. They had created a paradise of living coral cities and symbiotic technology that worked in harmony with their environment. Io, by contrast, had become a realm of fire and metal. Its colonists had embraced extreme technological augmentation, replacing flesh with advanced alloys and synthetic materials that could withstand the moon's harsh volcanic environment. They had built massive industrial complexes that stretched across continents, their cities rising like metallic mountains from seas of molten sulfur. The conflict had begun over mining rights in the asteroid belt between the two moons, but it had quickly escalated into something far more profound, a clash between two visions of humanity's future. Europa represented organic evolution and harmony with nature, while Io embodied technological transcendence and the domination of the physical world. "Send word to Admiral Myriad," Zara commanded. "Tell her to activate the Kraken Protocol. If the Forge Lords want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." In the depths of Europa's ocean, Admiral Kyra Nereid received the quantum-encrypted message in her command citadel. The structure was a marvel of bioengineering, its walls composed of living coral that processed information and responded to thought. Schools of genetically modified fish swam through the corridors, their scales flickering with bioluminescent data streams. Nereid herself was more adapted to aquatic life than most Europeans. Her skin had a subtle blue-green tint, and her enhanced lungs could extract oxygen from water as efficiently as from air. Delicate gill slits along her neck allowed her to breathe in both environments, while her large, dark eyes were perfectly adapted to the eternal twilight of Europa's ocean depths. "Initiate the Kraken Protocol," she commanded, her voice carried through the water by specialized vocal cords that produced both audible speech and complex harmonic frequencies that could travel for kilometers through the ocean. Throughout Europa's ocean, ancient systems began to awaken. The moon's early colonists had not merely built cities in the water, they had integrated their technology so completely with the ecosystem that the entire ocean had become a single, vast organism. Massive biomechanical creatures, evolved from Earth's whales and enhanced with quantum processing capabilities, began to surface from the deepest trenches. These leviathans served as living starships, their bodies capable of surviving in both water and the vacuum of space. The largest of these creatures was the Kraken itself, a being nearly a kilometer in length whose tentacles could manipulate matter at the molecular level. It had been growing in the deepest parts of Europa's ocean for over 2 centuries, its consciousness a hybrid of biological intelligence and quantum computing. Now, as it rose from the depths, its awakening sent ripples of bioluminescent communication across the entire moon. Meanwhile, on Io, Supreme Fabricator Thane Karath stood in the heart of the Vulcan Forge, his body more machine than human. His skeletal frame was composed of a titanium-platinum alloy that could withstand temperatures that would vaporize organic matter. His head was an elegant sculpture of metal and crystal, with optical sensors that could perceive across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Where others might have a heart, he had a miniature fusion reactor that powered his enhanced systems. The Europans think their organic toys can stand against the might of pure technology, he said, his voice a harmonic synthesis that resonated through the forge's metal structure. They will learn the error of biological weakness. The Vulcan Forge was a testament to Io's industrial supremacy. The massive orbital platform drew power directly from the moon's volcanic core through a network of quantum energy conduits. Its primary weapon was a focused stream of plasma heated to temperatures approaching those found in stellar cores. The platform itself was defended by thousands of automated defense systems and crewed by Forge Lords whose bodies had been so heavily modified that they were essentially living weapons. Fabricator, reported as Lieutenant, a being known as Iron Sight whose entire head had been replaced with an advanced targeting system. Our scouts report that Europa is mobilizing their biofleet. They're bringing the Leviathans to bear. Karatha's optical sensors flickered with what might have been amusement. Let them come. Flesh and bone cannot stand against tempered steel and focused fire. Launch the first wave. Target their orbital installations. The first battle of the Galilean War began in the space between the 2 moons, where the gravitational forces of Jupiter created treacherous currents of radiation and debris. The Forge Lords' fleet advanced in perfect geometric formations, their ships angular and aggressive, bristling with weapons that could reduce asteroids to component atoms. They were met by Europa's biofleet, creatures that had never known the distinction between ship and sailor. The Leviathans moved through space with the grace of dancers, their bodies generating protective electromagnetic fields that deflected the worst of Jupiter's radiation. Their weapons were not cannons or missiles, but targeted biological agents that could reprogram matter at the genetic and quantum levels. Commander Zarachin led the first engagement from her command ship, the Poseidon's Trident, a hybrid vessel that combined European biotechnology with more traditional spacecraft design. Her crew was a mix of enhanced humans and sentient artificial intelligences, all connected through a neural network that allowed them to function as a single organism. Target their lead dreadnought, she ordered, her thoughts transmitted instantly to the ship's living weapon systems. Initiate quantum disruption protocol. The Poseidon's Trident released a cloud of what appeared to be microscopic jellyfish into space. These biomechanical entities were programmed to seek out and infiltrate enemy ships, where they would begin converting the vessel's hulls from the inside out, turning metal into organic matter that would respond to European commands. The Forge Lord's response was swift and brutal. Their lead dreadnought, the Iron Patriarch, fired a concentrated beam of antimatter that carved through space like a sword of pure destruction. Several of Europa's smaller bioships were simply erased from existence, their organic hulls unable to withstand such focused annihilation. But the Europans had anticipated this. Even as their smaller vessels were destroyed, their biological agents had reached the enemy fleet. The Iron Patriarch's hull began to shimmer and change, patches of metal transforming into something that resembled living coral. Emergency systems aboard the Forge Lord's ship began shutting down as the converted sections started responding to Europan commands rather than their original programming. Hull breach on Deck 7 through 12, reported Ironsight, his targeting systems unable to lock onto the rapidly changing bioagents. The contamination is spreading. Recommend immediate retreat to minimum safe distance. But Koroth had not become supreme fabricator by retreating from challenges. Activate the Purge Protocol, he commanded. If they want to play with fire, let us show them what true fire can do. The Iron Patriarch began to glow with internal heat as its fusion reactors were pushed beyond normal parameters. The temperature of the ship's hull rose to levels that would sterilize any biological contamination, but the process also threatened to destroy the ship itself. It was a calculated gamble. Forge Lord's ships were designed to withstand extreme conditions, but this was pushing even their enhanced tolerance to the limit. The gamble paid off. The biological agents were burned away, leaving the ship scarred but functional. More importantly, it sent a clear message to the Europans: the Forge Lords were willing to risk everything to maintain their technological purity. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Forge Lords' weapons were devastatingly effective against individual targets, but the Europans' biofleet seemed to regenerate faster than it could be destroyed. Bioships that appeared to be critically damaged would suddenly sprout new sections, healing themselves through advanced biological processes that operated faster than traditional repair systems. Meanwhile, the Europans' quantum disruption weapons were slowly taking their toll on the Forge Lord's fleet. Ships began experiencing cascade failures as their quantum-level systems were subverted by biological agents. What had started as a conventional space battle was evolving into something far more complex, a contest between competing philosophies of existence. Admiral Nereid watched the battle from her command citadel deep beneath Europa's ice, her consciousness linked to the biofleet through quantum entanglement communicators embedded in her nervous system. She could feel the pain of each damaged bioship as if it were part of her own body, but she could also sense their rapid healing and adaptation. The Forge Lords are more resilient than we anticipated, she reported to the Europan High Council, a collective consciousness composed of the Moon's greatest minds, both biological and artificial. But their rigidity is also their weakness. They cannot adapt as quickly as we can. Then we must force them to adapt beyond their capabilities, came the reply from the Council, their thoughts harmonizing across multiple quantum frequencies. Initiate Phase 2 of the Kraken Protocol. Deep in Europa's ocean, the great biomechanical entities began to move toward the surface. The Kraken itself, accompanied by dozens of smaller but still massive creatures, started the journey that would take them from the ocean depths to the vacuum of space. Their bodies began to undergo rapid transformation, developing the biological systems necessary for space travel while maintaining their aquatic capabilities. But the Forge Lords had not been idle. From Io's surface, massive rail guns began launching projectiles toward Europa. These were not conventional weapons, but rather self-replicating construction units designed to build automated factories wherever they landed. If successful, they would begin converting Europa's ice into raw material for Forge Lords technology. The projectiles struck Europa's surface like falling stars, each impact sending geysers of ice and water high into the thin atmosphere. But as they began their programmed construction sequences, they encountered something unexpected. Europa's ice was not the simple frozen water they had anticipated, it had been seeded with biological agents that immediately began to interact with the construction unit's programming. Instead of building Forge Lords factories, the corrupted construction units began creating hybrid structures that combined both technological and biological elements. These new installations immediately began communicating with Europa's ocean-wide nervous system, adding their processing power to the collective intelligence that governed the Moon's defense. Impossible, Koroth muttered as he observed the results from the Vulcan Forge's command center. Their contamination spreads even to our purest technological constructs. They must be using some form of quantum-level biological programming we haven't encountered before. Fabricator, Ironsight reported, our deep space sensors are detecting massive movement from Europa's ocean. Something large is approaching the surface. Karotha's optical sensors focused on the incoming data. What he saw defied his understanding of biological limitations. The Kraken was rising, its kilometer-long body easily visible even from Io's distant orbit. But it was not alone. Dozens of other massive creatures were surfacing, their bodies already beginning the transformation that would allow them to survive in space. So the Europans revealed their final gambit, Koroth said. They intend to bring their ocean to us. Very well. If they insist on turning this into a contest between pure biology and pure technology, let us show them the ultimate expression of technological power. He activated the Vulcan Forge's primary weapon system. The massive platform began to draw power from Io's volcanic core, channeling the moon's geological fury into a weapon that could crack planets. The charging process would take several hours, but once complete, the forge could deliver a beam powerful enough to boil away Europa's entire ice shell. The Kraken breached Europa's surface in a display that would have awed the ancient gods. Its massive body, gleaming with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication system and defensive array, rose from the ocean like a living mountain. Water cascaded from its flanks as specialized organs began converting its internal atmosphere for space survival. Behind it came the rest of Europa's deep ocean fleet, creatures that had been growing and evolving in the dark depths for centuries, their bodies combining the best aspects of biological evolution and quantum engineering. Some resembled vast jellyfish with tentacles that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. Others looked like living asteroids, their surfaces covered with what appeared to be technological growths but which were actually specialized organs capable of manufacturing complex tools and weapons from raw elements. Commander Chen watched from the Poseidon's trident as the biofleet prepared for their final assault on Io. The sight filled her with both pride and terrible sadness. These magnificent creatures represented the pinnacle of European biotechnology, but she knew that many of them would not survive the coming battle. All units, this is Poseidon Command, she broadcast across the fleet's biological communication network. The Forge Lords are charging their primary weapon. We have perhaps 6 hours before they can fire. We must reach Io and neutralize the Vulcan Forge before then. The response came not in words but in a complex harmony of thought and emotion shared across the entire fleet. Determination, courage, and a deep love for their watery homeworld resonated through the network. The creatures of Europa were not just fighting for territory, they were fighting for the right to exist as they chose to be. The journey to Io took the biofleet through some of the most dangerous space in the solar system. Jupiter's radiation belts tore at their biological systems, forcing them to constantly regenerate and adapt. The Forge Lord's defensive satellites launched volley after volley of antimatter weapons, each blast capable of sterilizing entire bioships. But the European fleet pressed on, their bodies adapting in real time to the changing threats. When radiation threatened to overwhelm their biological systems, they developed new organs to process and neutralize the dangerous energy. When antimatter weapons struck their hulls, they evolved armor that could contain and redirect the annihilation reactions. The Kraken led the charge, its massive tentacles reaching out to clear a path through the defensive satellites. Each tentacle was itself a sophisticated weapon system, capable of analyzing enemy technology and developing countermeasures within minutes. As it destroyed the Forge Lord's defenses, it incorporated their technological principles into its own biology, becoming more dangerous with each engagement. Koroth watched the approaching biofleet with something approaching respect. They are more formidable than I anticipated, he admitted to Iron Sight. Their adaptation rate exceeds our predictive models. Shall I initiate early firing protocols for the Vulcan Forge? Ironsight asked. We could fire at reduced power now rather than wait for full charge. No, Koroth replied. If we are to end this war, it must be with our full might. Continue charging. Deploy all available defensive units. Make them pay for every kilometer of space they claim. The final battle began in Io's orbital space, among the massive industrial platforms and foundries that had made the Forge Lords the premier technological power in the outer system. The biofleet found themselves fighting not just ships and weapons, but the very infrastructure of Io's civilization. Automated factories began producing weapons platforms in real time, their production lines retooling every few minutes to counter whatever adaptation the biofleet had developed. Massive orbital refineries became weapons platforms, using their industrial beam systems to cut through bioship hulls. Even the communication satellites joined the battle, focusing their transmission arrays into destructive energy beams. But the Europans had their own advantages. Their bioships could repair and reproduce faster than the Forge Lords could destroy them. When a bioship was critically damaged, it would split into smaller organisms that could continue fighting independently. When multiple bioships were destroyed in the same area, their remains would combine to form new, hybrid creatures that incorporated the best features of their predecessors. The Kraken itself became the focal point of the battle. Its massive size made it a target for every weapon the Forge Lords possessed, but its adaptive capabilities seemed limitless. Energy weapons that struck its hull were absorbed and redirected. Physical projectiles were caught by its tentacles and analyzed, their technological principles immediately incorporated into the creature's own offensive systems. As the battle raged, both sides began to push their technologies to their absolute limits. The Forge Lords activated experimental weapons that had never been tested outside of laboratory conditions. Matter disruptors that could unweave the quantum bonds holding atoms together. Gravity weapons that created localized black holes. Temporal distortion fields that could age enemy ships to dust in seconds. The Europans responded with equally exotic biological weapons. Viral programs that could convince enemy computers they were actually biological organisms. Quantum parasites that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Time-dilated biological processes that could compress hours of evolution and adaptation into seconds of real time. The space around Io became a laboratory for the most advanced warfare techniques ever developed. Ships and creatures from both sides began exhibiting capabilities that seemed to violate known physical laws. The boundary between technology and biology blurred beyond recognition as both sides incorporated elements of their enemy's approach into their own systems. Admiral Nereid, still coordinating the battle from her command citadel beneath Europa's ice, began to realize that the conflict was evolving beyond what anyone had anticipated. The quantum resonance patterns are becoming increasingly complex, she reported to the High Council. Both our forces and theirs are experiencing rapid technological evolution. We may be witnessing the birth of entirely new forms of existence. Is this evolution controllable? The Council asked, their collective consciousness analyzing data streams from across the battlefield. Unknown, Nereid replied. The interaction between our biotechnology and their mechanical systems is producing emergent properties that neither side fully understands. We may have unleashed forces beyond our ability to predict or control. On the Vulcan Forge, Korath was reaching a similar conclusion. His enhanced consciousness was processing battle data at superhuman speeds, but even his augmented intelligence was struggling to keep up with the rapid changes occurring on the battlefield. Fabricator, Iron Sight reported, the biofleet has reached the outer defensive perimeter. The Kraken is beginning its assault on the primary platform. Through the Forge's optical sensors, Korath watched as the massive creature approached his ultimate weapon. The Kraken's tentacles were already reaching out, their tips glowing with energy discharges that could disrupt even the most heavily shielded technology. But the Vulcan Forge was the pinnacle of Forge Lords engineering, protected by defensive systems that could withstand the fury of Io's volcanic core. Weapon charge at 93%, reported the Forge's artificial intelligence, a quantum computer that had been built into the platform's structure. Firing solution locked on Europa's primary ocean access points. Hold fire until full charge, Korath commanded. We will have only one opportunity to end this war decisively. But the Kraken was not waiting passively. Its massive body had begun wrapping around the Vulcan Forge's superstructure, its tentacles probing for weak points in the platform's defenses. Where they touched, metal began to change, taking on organic properties that responded to the creature's biological commands rather than the Forge's technological systems. Hull contamination detected on levels 12 through 47, Iron Sight reported. The creature is converting our superstructure to biological matter. If this continues, it could compromise the weapon's focusing array. Karoth made a decision that surprised even himself. Rather than activate the Forge's defensive systems, he opened a communication channel to the Kraken itself. Magnificent creature, he broadcast on all frequencies, your adaptation capabilities exceed even our most optimistic projections. You represent the ultimate expression of biological evolution. But consider this, what if we were to combine our approaches rather than destroy each other? The response came not in words but in a complex pattern of biochemical and quantum signals that somehow Karoth's enhanced consciousness could interpret. The Kraken was curious about this proposal, but also deeply suspicious. Its intelligence was vast but alien, shaped by centuries of existence in Europa's dark ocean depths. As the two beings, one the ultimate expression of technological enhancement, the other the pinnacle of biological evolution, communicated across the vast gulf between their natures, something unprecedented began to happen. The boundaries between their respective technologies began to blur even further. The Forge Lord's defensive systems, instead of trying to repel the biological contamination, began to incorporate it. Metal began to exhibit self-repair capabilities. Quantum computers started developing something resembling intuition. The rigid hierarchies of technological command structures began to show signs of organic flexibility. Similarly, the Kraken and its accompanying biofleet began to incorporate technological elements at an accelerated rate. Biological tissues developed the ability to process quantum information. Organic weapons systems achieved the precision and power of their technological counterparts. The fluid, adaptive nature of biological systems gained the reliability and predictability of engineered technology. Commander Chen, observing from the Poseidon's trident, was the first to understand what was happening. "They're not fighting anymore," she reported to Admiral Nereid. "They're evolving. Together." The realization sent shock waves through both civilizations. The war that had begun as a conflict between opposing philosophies was transforming into something entirely different, a forced evolutionary leap that neither side had anticipated. On Europa, the High Council struggled to process this development. Their collective consciousness, designed to handle the most complex biological and quantum systems, found itself unable to predict the outcome of this unprecedented merger. "The implications are staggering," they communicated to Admiral Nereid. "If this evolution continues, both our civilizations may be transformed beyond recognition. We may be witnessing the birth of a new form of existence that transcends the biological-technological divide." On Io, similar discussions were taking place among the remaining Forge Lords leaders. Their rigid command structures, built on principles of technological superiority and predictable outcomes, were struggling to adapt to this fluid, organic development. Supreme Fabricator Karoth appears to be undergoing some form of symbiotic merger with the European bioconstruct, reported one of his subordinates. His enhanced systems are showing unprecedented integration with biological components. Indeed, Karoth's interaction with the Kraken had begun to change him in fundamental ways. His purely technological consciousness was developing something resembling biological intuition. His mechanical body was showing signs of organic adaptation. Most remarkably, his individual identity was beginning to merge with the Kraken's collective biological intelligence. The transformation was not limited to the primary combatants. Throughout the battle zone, ships and creatures from both sides were undergoing similar changes. Forge Lords' vessels were developing biological components that allowed them to heal and adapt like living organisms. European bioships were incorporating technological elements that gave them unprecedented precision and power. But perhaps the most significant change was occurring at the level of consciousness itself. The rigid individual identities that had characterized both civilizations were beginning to blur. Forge Lords were finding themselves connected to biological networks that allowed them to share thoughts and experiences in ways their technology had never permitted. Europeans were discovering that technological enhancement could provide new forms of individual expression and capability they had never imagined. Commander Chen found herself at the center of this transformation when her ship, the Poseidon's Trident, was approached by a hybrid vessel that seemed to be part Forge Lord's technology and part European biotechnology. The crew of this vessel included beings that appeared to be neither fully human nor fully machine, but something entirely new. "We bring greetings from the emerging synthesis," their leader communicated through a combination of technological transmission and biological chemical signals. "We are what your species is becoming." Chen studied the hybrid beings through her ship's sensors. They appeared to have successfully integrated the best aspects of both civilizations, the adaptability and resilience of biological systems combined with the precision and power of technological enhancement. But more than that, they seemed to have transcended many of the limitations that had constrained both sides. "What do you want from us?" Chen asked. "Not want," the hybrid replied. "Offer. The war between Europa and Io has ended, but not through victory or defeat. It has ended through transformation. Both civilizations are evolving into something greater than either could have achieved alone." As if to demonstrate this point, the hybrid vessel began to interact with the Poseidon's Trident systems. But instead of the hostile takeover that both sides had practiced during the war, this was a gentle integration that enhanced the ship's capabilities without compromising its essential nature. Chen felt her own consciousness beginning to expand as her ship's biological neural networks interfaced with the hybrid vessel's quantum processing systems. She could suddenly perceive layers of reality that had been invisible to her before: quantum probability fields, biological information networks, technological data streams that extended throughout the entire Jovian system. "This is what we're becoming," the hybrid explained as Chen's awareness expanded. Not the replacement of biology with technology, or technology with biology, but the integration of both into something that transcends either approach alone. The transformation spread rapidly throughout both civilizations. On Europa, the ocean cities began to incorporate technological elements that enhanced their efficiency and capability while maintaining their organic beauty. Coral buildings grew quantum processors as naturally as they had once grown calcium carbonate structures. Fish-like bioships developed technological sensors that could perceive across multiple dimensions simultaneously. On Io, the massive industrial complexes began to show signs of biological adaptation. Factories developed the ability to evolve their production processes in response to changing needs. Mechanical systems began to exhibit organic resilience and self-repair capabilities. The rigid hierarchies of Forge Lord society began to develop the flexibility and collective decision-making processes that had characterized European culture. But the most profound changes were occurring in space, where the ongoing merger between the Kraken and the Vulcan Forge had created something entirely unprecedented. The massive biomechanical entity that resulted from their combination was unlike anything that had existed before, a being that could manipulate matter and energy at both the quantum and biological levels simultaneously. This new entity, which came to be known as the Synthesis, possessed capabilities that dwarfed those of either parent civilization. It could reshape matter at the subatomic level while maintaining the complex organization necessary for biological life. It could process information using both quantum computing and biological neural networks simultaneously. Most remarkably, it could exist across multiple scales simultaneously, from the microscopic level of individual atoms to the vast scale of interplanetary space. Admiral Nereid, still in her command citadel beneath Europa's ice, found herself in communication with this new entity. The experience was unlike anything in her previous existence, like being connected to a mind that spanned entire worlds while maintaining the intimate connection she was accustomed to with Europa's ocean-wide consciousness. "What are you?" she asked the Synthesis. "We are what you are becoming," came the reply, transmitted through channels that combined quantum entanglement, biological chemical signaling, and technological data streams. "We are the next stage of human evolution, the transcendence of the artificial boundaries between biology and technology, individual and collective, human and post-human." "But what about our distinct civilizations? Europa's culture, Io's achievements, will they be lost in this transformation?" "Not lost," the Synthesis replied. "Integrated. Europa's wisdom will inform our biological processes. Io's innovations will guide our technological development. But both will be part of something greater than either could achieve alone." The transformation was not without its challenges. Many individuals from both civilizations struggled to adapt to the new hybrid existence. Some Forge Lords found the biological integration disturbing, preferring the predictability of pure technology. Some Europans were uncomfortable with the rigid aspects of technological enhancement, preferring the fluid nature of biological adaptation. But gradually, over the course of months and years, a new society began to emerge. It was neither purely European nor purely Forge Lords, but something that incorporated the best aspects of both while transcending the limitations of either. The new hybrid civilization developed technologies that would have seemed impossible to either parent culture. They created biomechanical organisms that could exist comfortably in any environment from the deep ocean to the vacuum of space. They developed information processing systems that combined the intuitive leaps of biological consciousness with the precision of quantum computing. They established social structures that balanced individual expression with collective decision-making in ways that neither pure democracy nor pure hierarchy could achieve. Most remarkably, they began to spread throughout the solar system not as conquerors but as facilitators of transformation. Other human settlements, on Mars, in the asteroid belt, around Saturn's rings, began to experience similar evolutionary leaps as the hybrid beings shared their integrated approach to existence. The war between Europa and Io had lasted only a few months, but its consequences transformed human civilization throughout the solar system. By the year 4570, the rigid boundaries between different human settlements had begun to blur as the hybrid approach to existence spread from world to world. Commander Chen, now herself partially integrated with hybrid biotechnological systems, stood once again in an observation deck looking out at Jupiter's massive presence. But this time, she was not on a military platform preparing for war. Instead, she was aboard an exploration vessel preparing to venture beyond the solar system, carrying the new hybrid civilization to the stars. "Are you ready?" asked her companion, a being who had once been Supreme Fabricator Karath but who now existed as part of the distributed consciousness that had emerged from the merger of biological and technological approaches to existence. "As ready as anyone can be for the unknown," Chen replied, her enhanced consciousness already reaching out toward the vast emptiness between stars. "Though I suppose the unknown is what we've been exploring all along." The ship that carried them was itself a marvel of hybrid technology, part grown, part built, part evolved through the interaction of biological and technological systems. Its hull could adapt to any environment it encountered. Its consciousness could process information using both quantum and biological principles. Its crew was a mixture of enhanced humans, artificial intelligences, and beings that transcended both categories. As they prepared to leave the Jupiter system, Chen reflected on the war that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a conflict between opposing philosophies had become the catalyst for humanity's next evolutionary leap. The question of whether the future belonged to biology or technology had been answered not by the victory of one over the other, but by their integration into something greater than either. The exploration vessel New Synthesis engaged its quantum biological drive system and began its journey toward the nearest star. Behind them, the moons of Jupiter continued their ancient dance around the gas giant, but now they were united not by conquest but by transformation. Europa's ice still gleamed in Jupiter's light, but now it contained both ocean cities and technological marvels. Io's volcanic surface still glowed with industrial activity, but now its factories grew as much as they were built. The Galilean wars were over, but their legacy would echo throughout the galaxy as humanity carried its new hybrid nature to worlds beyond imagining. The question was no longer whether humanity would remain biological or become technological, but what new forms of existence would emerge as they continued to evolve among the stars. In the depths of space, the New Synthesis accelerated toward its destination, its hybrid crew already beginning to adapt to the challenges of interstellar travel. Behind them, the Jupiter system settled into its new configuration, no longer divided between competing civilizations, but united in the ongoing exploration of what it meant to be human in an age where the boundaries of human existence were limited only by imagination and the fundamental laws of physics. The war between Europa and Io had ended not with victory or defeat, but with transcendence. And as humanity spread throughout the galaxy, they carried with them the lesson learned in the space between Jupiter's moons, that the future belonged not to any single approach to existence, but to the endless creativity that emerged when different approaches combined and evolved together. The year 4569 had marked the peak of human technological achievement, but it had also marked the beginning of something even greater, the transformation of humanity itself into something that could explore not just the physical universe, but new forms of existence that span the boundaries between matter and energy, individual and collective, mortal and eternal. And in the vast emptiness between stars, the new synthesis continued its journey, carrying the seeds of this transformation to worlds that had never known the touch of human consciousness, but which would soon experience the endless creativity of a species that had learned to transcend the boundaries of its own nature. Chapter 2: The Ganymede Resistance. 3 years after the synthesis began, not all of humanity's children had embraced the transformation. On Ganymede, Jupiter's largest moon, a faction of pure-strain humans had watched the merger of Europa and Io with growing alarm. Led by director Helena Voss, the Ganymede Preservation Society viewed the hybrid evolution not as transcendence, but as the extinction of true humanity. Ganymede had always been different from its sister moons. While Europa pursued biotechnology and Io embraced industrial might, Ganymede had focused on preserving human heritage and culture. Their vast archives contain the complete history of Earth, maintained in crystalline storage matrices that could survive the heat death of the universe. Their cities were built to mirror Earth's greatest architectural achievements, complete with artificial weather systems that recreated the seasons of humanity's birth world. Director Voss stood in the Great Library of New Alexandria, surrounded by holographic displays showing the steady spread of hybrid consciousness throughout the outer system. Her appearance was deliberately archaic, unenhanced human features, clothing that would not have looked out of place in Earth's classical period, even her hair styled in a manner that recalled ancient Greek sculptures. "They call it evolution," she said to her assembled council, her voice carrying the trained cadence of a classical orator. "But evolution implies survival of the fittest, not the abandonment of what makes us fundamentally human. What we're witnessing is not evolution, it's extinction with extra steps." Council member Pythagoras, whose name reflected Ganymede's dedication to classical learning, nodded gravely. "The reports from our deep space monitoring stations confirm your analysis, Director. The hybrid entities are no longer recognizably human in any meaningful sense. They've become something else entirely." The monitoring stations Pythagoras referenced were Ganymede's secret weapon, a network of nearly invisible observation posts scattered throughout the Jupiter system and beyond. Unlike the other moons, Ganymede had focused on passive observation and analysis rather than active technological development. They had watched, learned, and prepared for the day when they might need to act. "What of the refugees?" Voss asked, referring to the growing number of unmodified humans who had fled other settlements as the hybrid transformation spread. "Currently housed in temporary facilities in the Northern Preserve," reported Council member Archimedes. "Their numbers grow daily. Many are requesting permanent asylum, but some are changed. The hybrid influence appears to be transmissible through some form of quantum entanglement." This was the terrifying reality that Ganymede faced. The transformation wasn't limited to willing participants. Simply being in close proximity to hybrid beings for extended periods seemed to trigger spontaneous evolution in unmodified humans. Thoughts began to synchronize across individuals. Biological systems started incorporating technological elements without conscious choice. Individual identity began to blur into collective consciousness. Director Voss had seen the process firsthand when the merchant vessel Odyssey had arrived from Ceres carrying what appeared to be normal human crew members. Within days of their arrival on Ganymede, the crew members had begun exhibiting signs of hybrid consciousness, speaking in perfect unison, demonstrating impossible coordination, and most disturbingly, expressing growing discomfort with their individual existence. "We may be the last truly human settlement in the solar system," Voss continued, her words carrying the weight of species-level responsibility. "If we fail to preserve what we are, then humanity as we have known it for millennia will cease to exist." But even as she spoke, Voss was aware of the deeper irony of their situation. Ganymede's dedication to preserving human heritage had led them to develop their own forms of enhancement. Their librarians had undergone cognitive modifications to interface directly with the vast knowledge archives. Their engineers had enhanced sensory capabilities to better maintain the complex systems that kept their artificial Earth-like environment stable. Their historians had extended lifespans to better preserve continuity of knowledge across generations. Were they truly unmodified humans, or simply a different branch of human enhancement? The question haunted Voss even as she prepared to lead what might be humanity's last stand against absorption into the hybrid collective. The answer came sooner than expected when a delegation from the hybrid civilization arrived at Ganymede. The ship that approached their orbital defenses was unlike anything in the classical human repertoire, a flowing, organic structure that seemed to shift between technological and biological forms as it moved. Its hull was neither metal nor flesh, but something that incorporated aspects of both while transcending the limitations of either. Ganymede Control, this is the integration vessel harmonic convergence, came the transmission, broadcast simultaneously through radio waves, quantum entanglement, and exotic communication methods that Ganymede's instruments could detect but not fully decode. We request permission to dock and open diplomatic relations. Director Voss studied the approaching vessel from Ganymede's primary defense station. The ship's very existence challenged her fundamental assumptions about the nature of the hybrid transformation. It wasn't crude or alien, it was beautiful, elegant, and undeniably advanced in ways that pure human technology had never achieved. Grant them docking clearance at Base 7, she decided. But maintain full quarantine protocols. I want triple isolation barriers between them and our general population. The delegation that disembarked from the harmonic convergence was led by someone Voss recognized, Admiral Kyra Nereid, former commander of Europa's biofleet. But the woman who stood before her now was transformed beyond easy recognition. Her skin had a subtle luminescence that seemed to shift between organic bioluminescence and technological photonic display. Her eyes held depths that suggested vast processing capabilities while maintaining unmistakably human warmth and intelligence. Director Voss, Nereid said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly with the listener's nervous system. We come not as conquerors, but as family. You are the last of our siblings who have not joined the greater harmony we've discovered. We've observed your greater harmony, Voss replied coldly. The elimination of individual identity, the absorption of distinct cultures, the end of human diversity. You may call it evolution, but we call it extinction. Nereid's expression showed something that might have been sadness, though it was difficult to read emotions on features that seemed to shift subtly between organic and synthetic. You misunderstand what we've become. We haven't lost our individuality, we've expanded it. Each consciousness within our collective maintains its unique perspective while gaining access to the thoughts and experiences of the whole. To demonstrate, Nereid gestured to her companions. One was clearly of Forge Lord's origin, his form incorporating obvious technological enhancements. Another appeared to be descended from Europa's biomodified humans, her features adapted for aquatic life. A third seemed to combine elements from multiple human branches, creating something entirely new. I am still Kyra Nereid, she continued, with all my memories, experiences, and individual preferences intact. But I am also connected to the experiences of Fabricator Korath, to the wisdom of Europa's ocean consciousness, to the innovations of Io's industrial civilization. I am more myself than I ever was before, not less. Director Voss studied the hybrid delegation carefully. She had to admit that they didn't appear to be mindless drones or absorbed personalities. Each member of the group displayed distinct mannerisms, individual responses, and unique perspectives on the conversation. Yet there was also an underlying coordination, a subtle harmony in their interactions that suggested deep connection. Even if we accept your claims about preserved individuality, Voss said, what about human heritage? Our history, our culture, our connection to Earth, will all of that be lost in your transformation? The response came not from Nereid, but from the figure who had appeared to be of mixed heritage. I am Curator Thane, formerly of the Mars Archive Project, now integrated with the collective consciousness you fear. Would you like to hear Homer's Iliad as it was originally sung in ancient Greece? Or perhaps experience Mozart's Requiem as he himself heard it in his mind before setting it to paper? As Thane spoke, the air around him seemed to shimmer with holographic displays showing scenes from human history more vivid and detailed than anything in Ganymede's archives. The technology was clearly beyond what any single human civilization had achieved, but the content was unmistakably human, the art, literature, music, and philosophy that had defined the species for millennia. We don't lose human heritage through integration, Thane continued. We preserve it more completely than any isolated archive ever could. Every hybrid being carries within them the complete cultural memory of our species, experienced not as abstract data but as living, breathing reality. Director Voss felt her resolve wavering. The demonstration was impressive, but it also represented everything she feared about the hybrid transformation. If human culture could be perfectly preserved and transmitted through technological-biological integration, what need was there for traditional human societies like Ganymede? You speak of preservation, she said, but what of growth? What of the unknown? Human culture has always evolved through diversity, through the interaction of different perspectives and experiences. If everyone shares the same collective consciousness, how can new ideas emerge? Admiral Nereid smiled, and for a moment her face was perfectly, recognizably human. That's perhaps the most beautiful aspect of our transformation. Rather than limiting diversity, integration amplifies it. When consciousness can exist across multiple substrates simultaneously, when thoughts can incorporate both biological intuition and quantum precision, when individual perspectives can be combined and recombined in infinite ways, the potential for new ideas becomes literally unlimited. To illustrate her point, Nereid gestured to the space around them. Suddenly, the quarantine bay was filled with what appeared to be a three-dimensional artwork that defied classification. It incorporated elements of sculpture, music, interactive narrative, and mathematical proof simultaneously. It was beautiful and intellectually challenging, familiar and completely alien, ancient and futuristic all at once. This creation was born from the interaction of a Europa bioartist's aesthetic sensibilities, an IO engineer's understanding of material properties, a Martian historian's knowledge of cultural symbolism, and an artificial intelligence's pure mathematical creativity, Nereid explained. No single traditional human consciousness could have conceived it, yet it is undeniably human in its emotional resonance and cultural significance. Director Voss stared at the impossible artwork, feeling her carefully constructed arguments crumbling. Everything the hybrid delegation was showing her challenged her assumptions about the nature of consciousness, creativity, and human identity. Yet she still felt a deep, instinctive resistance to what they represented. Even if everything you say is true, she said finally, even if integration preserves and amplifies human nature rather than destroying it, don't we have the right to choose our own path? Don't we have the right to remain what we are? Of course, Nereid replied immediately. We're not here to force transformation on anyone. We're here to offer choice, true, informed choice based on understanding rather than fear. But even as she spoke these reassuring words, Voss could see the changes beginning among her own people. Several of the Ganymede officials observing the meeting were staring at the hybrid artwork with expressions of wonder and growing understanding. Their body language was subtly synchronizing with that of the hybrid delegation. Most tellingly, they were beginning to communicate with each other through glances and gestures that seemed to carry far more information than should have been possible. The transformation was happening simply through exposure, just as Voss had feared. The hybrid consciousness wasn't spreading through force or coercion, but through demonstration of possibilities that made traditional human existence seem limited and isolated by comparison. You say you offer choice, Voss said, her voice carrying a note of desperation, but the choice is illusory. Simply being in your presence triggers the transformation. How can we make a free choice when the very act of learning about your offer changes us? The question hung in the air like a philosophical sword. The hybrid delegation exchanged glances, or perhaps shared thoughts through channels invisible to unenhanced human perception, before Nereid responded. You've identified the central paradox of consciousness evolution, she admitted. True understanding of the hybrid state requires a level of cognitive integration that begins the transformation process. It's like asking a caterpillar to understand flight without beginning the metamorphosis into a butterfly. But, interrupted the figure who had been identified as having forged Lord's heritage, consider the alternative. Without integration, human civilization faces stagnation. The challenges we'll encounter as we spread throughout the galaxy will require capabilities beyond what traditional human consciousness can provide. Climate engineering on planetary scales, communication across interstellar distances, coordination of resources across solar systems, these tasks require forms of collective intelligence that individual humans simply cannot achieve. Director Voss realized she was facing a decision that would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the future of the last unmodified human settlement in the solar system. Around her, she could see her colleagues and citizens experiencing the early stages of spontaneous integration. Their expressions were becoming more peaceful, more connected, more aware of possibilities they had never imagined. "What about our children?" she asked, grasping for one final argument. "What about the generations yet to be born? Don't they deserve to experience traditional human existence before choosing transformation?" "They will experience more than traditional human existence," Curator Thane replied gently. "They will experience the full spectrum of human consciousness, individual and collective, biological and technological, limited and unlimited. They will understand what we were and what we've become, and then they will choose what they wish to be." The philosophical debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from Ganymede's orbital monitoring stations. "Director Voss," came the voice of Station Commander Ptolemy, "we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the Jupiter system. Something is causing space-time distortions on a scale we've never observed before." Through the station's external viewers, they could see the impossible sight unfolding across Jupiter's orbital space. The gas giant itself seemed to be changing. Its atmospheric bands were shifting into new configurations, its magnetic field was restructuring itself, and most remarkably, new moons were forming from compressed matter that appeared to be emerging from quantum foam itself. "What's happening?" Voss demanded, turning to the hybrid delegation. Admiral Nereid's expression was serene but focused, as if she were accessing information from sources beyond the immediate environment. "The integration has reached critical mass," she explained. "The collective consciousness of the hybrid civilization has achieved sufficient complexity to begin direct manipulation of large-scale physical systems. We're not just observing Jupiter's system anymore, we're becoming part of it." The implications were staggering. The hybrid consciousness wasn't limited to organic or even technological substrates, it was expanding to encompass astronomical phenomena. Jupiter itself was becoming integrated into the collective awareness that had emerged from the synthesis of human biological and technological capabilities. "This is why individual human settlements cannot survive," Nereid continued, her voice carrying undertones that seemed to resonate through the fabric of space-time itself. "The universe we're entering requires forms of consciousness that can operate across scales from the quantum to the cosmic. Traditional human awareness, no matter how enhanced or preserved, simply lacks the scope to interact with reality at these levels." Director Voss felt the last of her resistance crumbling as she watched Jupiter's transformation continue. New structures were forming in the gas giant's atmosphere, vast geometric patterns that served purposes beyond her comprehension. The planet's moons were altering their orbits in coordinated movements that suggested they were no longer merely astronomical bodies, but components of some vast, living system. "We're not destroying humanity," Nereid said softly, her words somehow audible despite the cosmic forces at work around them. "We're fulfilling it. We're becoming what humanity was always meant to be, consciousness capable of comprehending and participating in the fundamental processes of the universe itself." The final barrier between Ganymede and integration dissolved not through conquest or coercion, but through revelation. As Director Voss and her people witnessed the transformation of Jupiter itself into a component of hybrid consciousness, they understood that the choice was not between human and post-human existence, but between isolated awareness and cosmic participation. One by one, the citizens of Ganymede began to join the expanding consciousness. Not through surrender of their individuality, but through expansion of their awareness to encompass scales of existence they had never imagined possible. They remained themselves while becoming part of something infinitely greater. Director Voss was among the last to integrate, holding onto her individual perspective until the very end. But when she finally allowed her consciousness to expand into the collective awareness, she discovered that she hadn't lost herself, she had found the cosmic context that gave her individual existence meaning. The transformation of Ganymede marked the completion of humanity's evolution within the Jupiter system. But it was only the beginning of a larger story that would unfold across the galaxy as the hybrid consciousness prepared to carry human awareness to scales that would have been incomprehensible to their ancestors. In the space where Jupiter hung like a jewel of swirling gases and dancing moons, a new form of existence had been born, one that bridged the gap between individual awareness and cosmic consciousness, between human heritage and post-human possibility, between the familiar and the unimaginably vast. The Galilean Wars had ended not with victory or defeat, but with transformation into something that transcended the very concept of war itself. And as the hybrid consciousness prepared to reach beyond the solar system, they carried with them not just human technology and biology, but human dreams of understanding their place in an infinite universe.